Hey guys, it's M4J here and welcome back to Global Ventures here on Planet Coaster. Blink and you'll miss it, but the original coaster that was in this position here is gone. As the punny title of this video suggests, we are going to be building probably the wildest ride in the park so far. We're going to be doing a Rocky Mountain construction coaster called Rocky Mountaineer, therefore a Rocky Mountain construction. That's a really bad pun, but it's the best I can do when, in such short time constraints. Anyway, this ride is wild, as I said. Some of it is a little bit slow-paced, and I think I'll be reworking those little slow sections. Plus, the trains still enter the final brakes way too fast for my liking, so I will be fixing that as well. But overall, for a first attempt, I know I kind of rebuilt a few things here and there, which you'll see in the episode, but for a first attempt, I'm actually kind of happy with the result. Ignore what I'm building on screen now. This was supposed to be me trying to use the landscape to my advantage and build this really wild, wacky, kind of like a dive loop sort of opening to the ride. Didn't really work out how I wanted it though, so we scrapped this. Kind of wish I could hit the fast forward button at this point because it's quite painful to see this. Eventually though we do settle on a style a little similar to Wildwood. So comes out the station, slight down slope, hits a block brake and then goes into the beginning of the ride. You may remember last episode, I think it was, or the episode before. I think it was last episode actually, where we built the twisted dive at the end of Bandito. I talked about how the original element at the end of Bandito wasn't really going to work for Bandito, but it would work for this ride. And you will see how that has been implemented very, very shortly. So I'll give you a quick rundown as to what this ride actually is. As I've already said, it's a Rocky Mountain construction style coaster. I would consider it a ground up iBox design, a bit like Zadra Energylandia, which is about to open in Poland. The POV, so I'm recording this voiceover here on the Monday. The POV I think was first released today, so when you watch this on the Wednesday it would have been 2 days ago. I've watched it and I'm a little bit indifferent about it, if I'm completely honest. The first drop looks crazy and the 0G stall looks crazy, and you'll see a little tribute to that in just a second. But the rest of the ride, I don't know. Some of it felt a bit slow, some of it felt a bit samey. I think that's the problem with RMCs now, is they've pretty much run out of original elements. Things like the outward bank curve, the 0G stalls, the dive loop, which I think I think it's a dive loop that Goliath has at Six Flags. They've all been done, and you can't really do them again without being accused of running out of ideas. So they kind of painted themselves into a corner a little bit, but it does mean people will shut up about Steel Vengeance now, which I'm not against at all. I think Steel Vengeance is a very good ride from what I can see, but I'm a bit tired of people just going on about Cedar Point as if they're the best thing ever, because they're not, in my opinion. They build these big, wonderful, extravagant rides, but they're really boring to actually look at. There's no theme, there's no story, there's no point to them, apart from being big and bold. Like Millennium Force is just a giga coaster. Like, it's not a giga coaster that tells the story of, or anything like that. It's just big and fast, and there's only so many times you can be big and fast before you become big, boring and fast. So that's my personal opinion. I know not everyone will agree, and I'm pretty sure if I actually went to Cedar Point and tried out the rides, I would appreciate them a little bit more. But I think it's my usual problem of I don't hate the thing, I hate the fans of the thing. And I really don't like the fact that every time a new ride is announced, people always go on about, is it going to be as fast as Steel Vengeance? And quite frankly, I don't care. Particularly when a ride in Europe is announced, because Europe and America are poles apart when it comes to the roller coaster industry. They're never going to be the same. Don't expect them to be the same. They are never going to be the same. Zadra is the closest Europe will ever get to a ride like Steel Vengeance. Mainly because we have slightly tighter limitations, particularly here in the UK. Everyone goes on about Alton Towers, and you know, like Wicker Man, very good ride, but everyone goes on about it's not the tallest, it's not the fastest, it's not the longest. Of course it's not. Alton Towers aren't allowed to build above the tree height. They're not going to build something 500 foot tall, are they? That's ridiculous. I also get tired of, like, I see these polls on Reddit, like, what's your favourite inverted coaster? Did I say this last episode? I think I did. No one says Nemesis. Because most people who answer these polls are American, who've never been to Europe, never been to England, never been to Alton Towers, never ridden Nemesis. And Nemesis is 25 years old now, this year, and it still consistently ranks as one of the best coasters of its type in the world. And the reason is, it's built in a massive Great Hole, because Alton Towers can't build above the tree line, as I've already said, so they have to improvise. And boy did they improvise with Nemesis. I've ridden it twice. Only, was it 6 years ago, I think? 5 years ago was the first time I rode it, and I rode it again the next day. I love it. I think it's absolutely brilliant. The way they've worked it into the area and the story that goes with it, it's a little loose sometimes, the story, like they've pinned the alien down with steel. Okay, I kind of buy it, but the ride itself is fantastic because of its location. The fact that you feel like every time you go down into the hole, you feel like you're going to lose your legs because, you know, the rock walls and things like that. I think it's just really, really well done. Really well done. I like the fact as well that the vertical loop isn't the first thing you do off the lift hill, because pretty much every inverted coaster in America, that is what happens. You go down the big drop, and the first thing you do is go through a vertical loop, and it's so repetitive. Pretty much every single inverted coaster in America does it. The only one that doesn't is Banshee at Kings Island, and that's because it does it for its second element instead. So the fact that Nemesis kind of builds up to that vertical loop, and the whole ride is a constant building up. You never lose speed, you are always gaining speed. So you start off with the little drop, which is deceptively quick actually, because it looks like a really small drop, but you're constantly going downhill until you enter that first corkscrew. And then after you leave that corkscrew, you go into one of the tightest helices. I think that's the plural of helix. One of the tightest elements that B&M have ever designed. And I think you pull like 4 Gs, 3.5, 4 Gs, something like that, going around that bend. It's insane. And the fact that, I mean, my two favourite places in theme parks to stand and watch is that helix on Nemesis, and just after the vertical loop on Nemesis Inferno, because when the train goes past, it quite literally knocks you off your feet. And the one at Alton Towers especially, because it really whips around next to that fence. And the fact that it wraps around the monorail track as well, I think is brilliant. And then you drop down and you go over the 0G, and oh, it's just fantastic. Such a well-designed ride. There will never be anything like it. Other parks have tried. Black Mamba at Phantasialand is probably the closest, and I would argue that Black Mamba perhaps is a little more intense than Nemesis, because it has a few more elements. It has the Immelman where you nearly hit the wall, but Nemesis was the first to do that kind of terrain coaster, and the fact that it was only ever the second inverted coaster that B&M designed as well is just crazy. But to get back on point, we're at the top of the Rocky Mountain. Even though we're not at the top, it'll go a little bit higher, plus there's loads of other stuff that will be wrapped around here as well. So this coaster, it starts off with the 85-degree drop, which is quite tall considering, and then it goes into the double 0G element with the bend. I think it's got a couple of airtime hills. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to look on the screen as well to see what I can see. Then it rises up into the Heartline roll, a really slow roll, and that will go over one of the main pathways into this area of the park. So that's why I like that little bit so much. And this bit here, I've really gone with the outward banking here. I've made it a little bit crazy. So you've got the little bit where, inspired by Wildfire, I'm going to stop saying little bit as well because I keep repeating that. You've got the small section after the lift hill where it's inspired by Wildfire. You sort of loop around under yourself and go under the lift hill. But this bit here, you're constantly building speed. You do the big overbank turn, which is essentially over the edge of a mountain. So you really get that kind of hang time fear factor. And then you go down the big drop of the ride underneath that overbank turn. And this is where the ride gets wild. So to start with, it's a little bit on the slow side. The intro to the ride. That's done by design. I never like rides, apart from launched coasters, I never like rides that just go all out straight away, because you always end up just coasting back to the station, which is a little bit dull. I always like to build up to the big moment of the ride, and this is by far the big moment of the ride. So it's an 85-degree drop. You go up to about 65 miles per hour at the bottom. Now most RMCs have this kind of unbanked small diagonal turn, at the bottom of these hills. So Steel Vengeance has it, Zardra has it. I believe most do. Untamed has it. I'm trying to remember what other ones do and don't. I think some of the slightly smaller RMCs don't have it. I wanted Rocky Mountain here to have one because, you know, it's on the bigger side. And this also has what only one other RMC coaster in the world has, which is a Immelmann, and it's a big one. It is a huge one. The one problem I have with the pre-made Immelmann, I don't think I'd be able to hand make one, because I think 85 degrees is the highest you can go with a pitch-wise, which is a little inconvenient. But you'll notice there's a support structure on the far left-hand side there of that Immelmann. That literally chops the heads of the riders off as they go past. So I've had to turn off the supports on the Immelmann, which means I'm going to have to build my own, which I'm not particularly looking forward to doing, but I'll do it if I absolutely have to. So as you could probably tell, the Immelmann of Rocky Mountaineer is going to be the landmark of this area of the park. This is Peak of the Rockies, by the way, for those of you that don't know. I did worry when I came up with that name, because I did think for a second, wait, the Rockies, isn't that just the USA? But no, they do sort of jut into Canada as well. Plus there is the train, the Rocky Mountaineer, that runs mostly through Canada. So I think I got away with it. So this is the signature ride of the area. I think there's only 2 major rides. There might be like a couple of flat rides maybe, because we don't have many flat rides in the park. We've got Shipwrecked over in the tropical section, and we've got Ganbate Ne in the City of the Future section. We don't have any other flat rides. We do have Wagon Wheel in Legend of the Frontier, but it's not been officially relocated yet, so it's just it's a non-existent ride at the moment in the park. So we will have to work on that. You might have just seen there as well on screen, I've just built the 0G stall. So the Immelmann is big, the 0G stall is also big. It's designed to go over the station. I will put some fancy supports on that as well. I did turn off the supports, you'll see me do that in a second. And I will design something a little bit like Zardra and a little bit like Goliath. The one thing I'm a little bit disappointed about with that is I wasn't able to build it with the lift hill, because the lift hill is a little ways away from that area. And it's a bit too much of a slog to actually go and change it. So we'll just leave it as a freestanding structure. I think it'll look quite cool. The fact that it goes over the station like it does as well, I think is pretty cool. So this is me sort of debating what element to build next. I wanted to go with a Cobra roll originally, because there is no RMC coaster with a Cobra roll. The problem with that is, I mean, the supports actually worked out quite well, but there's a bit of a clash here where you bump your head going down the main drop section. So I went against that idea in the end. I think here I just built a big airtime hill in the end. So there's no fixed plot to this ride. At a push, I would say that you're on the Rocky Mountaineer Express and the ride takes a bit of a wild turn. It's a little too close to Manic Miner if I do that though. So having just criticised other parks for not coming up with stories for their rides, I think this one will be one of those ones where you can't really put a story to it. I will work on it though, because I would like to try and get something working with this, because I think it works. Every ride works best with a story. I was watching a video the other day about Journey to Atlantis at SeaWorld Orlando, and how they've removed all of the story points of the ride and how it's kind of ruined it. And I agree. You take the story out of a ride and what you're left with, just track, really. Like, why am I going down this drop? There's no point in me going down this drop because there's nothing story-based that has led me to this drop. And again, it's personal opinion, but you know, it's how I feel. So there's the airtime hill. I tried to make it so that you get more airtime as you go through the element, but I don't think I've done my maths right. I mean, this is a game at the end of the day, so I wasn't going to put too much mathematical equation into it, and to be perfectly honest, I put no mathematical equation into it. I kind of had it in my head, and I think this is true, that most elements get tighter as you go through them, and that's why the forces get more intense. So a lot of helixes on roller coasters do this. As you go through the helix, the curve of the track actually gets tighter the more you go through it, and that's why it feels more and more intense. Particularly ones where you're going upwards as you go through the helix, because you're technically slowing down, so the forces should become less obvious, but because the curve of the track is getting tighter and tighter, it's almost cancelling out the effect of slowing down. So that's what I wanted to do. I probably need to go back and redo it to make it work. One thing I'm concerned about with this particular ride is there's not much airtime, which is one of the things that RMC is best known for. So the section between the 0G Heartline roll thing and the lift hill, I'm going to go and rework that to put some more airtime in. I might even reposition the lift hill slightly, just to make it a little bit closer to the rest of the ride. Although there is another ride that I'm planning on building that will interact with this ride, so it might work out still. And then you'll see that I've put the overbank turn, which is very similar to what Bandito has. In fact, it is the same element, just mirrored. And then I've put a wave turn, which is the one where you turn 90 degrees. You can see here I've made it turn to the right. You get some weird airtime, I've heard from that, like sideways lateral airtime, which is something I've never experienced before, so I'd quite like to try that out one day. And then the ride just ends, and that's where I need to go back and rework it, because I do feel like it could probably do one more lap of the area, maybe a couple more elements. I was trying to think at the time, I was thinking on the fly, like what kind of elements could I put in. So it's got 2 outward bank turns, it's got a couple of unbanked lateral turns, actually it's got 3 outward bank turns, looking at it. It's got the very slow Heartline roll, so you get lots of hang time, particularly with the lap bars. It's got the Immelman, it's got the 0G stall, it's got the double 0G roll element. I need to come up with a name for that. It's kind of like a twisted horseshoe. Maybe I'll call it like a twisted bull ring or something like that, just to make it a little bit different to what Intamin call their elements. We've got this little top of the mountain element here with the crazy outwards turn. I think that's more of a wave turn than anything. And yes, do not adjust your picture, that is actually what it looks like. And it actually rides quite smooth when you try it out. It's pretty cool. It's one of my favourite bits of the ride, because again, it's a bit like Nemesis, you're constantly picking up speed once you get off the lift hill. It starts off very, very slow, but by the time you hit the apex of the big drop, you are going pretty fast. I will also rework I guess it's a quadruple down. There's 4 drops in one, essentially, which is something that the old Rocky Mountaineer had as well before I rebuilt it. I preferred this version though, because it's a little bit more well thought out. Although that being said, coming off of the first big drop, the first little hop is fine, but the second one, I think there's a little too much dip going under the station, so I could flatten that out a little bit, and then you get a nice head chopper effect of going under the station as well. There's me removing the supports on the 0G stall. Again, the turn radius here looks a little bit tight, and I think I do rebuild it in a second to make it a little looser. But you'll see the POV at the end of this video for what the ride looks like at the time of me finishing the construction here. And it's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. This wave turn gets rebuilt as well in a second, so that the support structure comes back. But yeah, I need to rebuild the section going into the brake run. I think that could be done a little bit better. Actually having... So currently it goes into a tunnel before the lift hill. I'm actually thinking of having it just be out in the open rather than underground, because I think that will work better for the ride as a whole. I will put a little tunnel in, but not a massive one. Also, the big drop from the top of the mountain, that won't be in a tunnel either. That'll be in like a valley, maybe with a waterfall and a bridge going over it, that kind of thing. Make it look really nice. This area of the park is going to be quite unique in that there will be a pathway that goes all the way up to the top of the mountain. Like Heart of the Forest is built on a similarly sized hill. That doesn't have pathway at the top. That's just ride track only up there. But the Peak of the Rockies, the part of the appeal is it's a mountain. You're supposed to be able to go at least part way up it. So I will be doing that, and I'll be building a restaurant at the top, maybe even a hotel at the top. Make it look like some log cabins, make it look quite nice. There's me fixing the wave stall. You can also see here I've built the overbank turn a little bit lower, just to make it faster, because the ride was slowing down quite a lot going into that. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of this build. So I will cut to the POV now. You'll get to see the ride. It does change a little bit because I did do some tweaking off camera after I recorded this. But let me know in the comments down below what you think of the ride. If you're watching this on Reddit as well, feel free to comment below there as well and give me some feedback, because this is a ride I feel like I need feedback on, so feel free to offer it. But besides that, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course if you're enjoying the series. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you have already subscribed to the channel, thank you guys for your continued support, and until next time, and enjoy the POV, I will see you soon.